Dear students, warm greetings on behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University. Today's tele-lesson is on payment of checks. This is for the BCom third year, 5th semester students for the course Banking Law and Practice. Dear students, in today's tele-lesson, we will cover the following topics. 1. We will know what is a paying banker. Then we will understand the duties and responsibilities of a paying banker. Then we will try to learn the conditions to get statutory protection by the paying banker. Then we will understand the precautions to be taken by the paying banker. Also, we will learn what is that a banker has to do when there is any material alterations in the check. We will also try to learn what is payment in due course, and also when a banker will refuse payment and when the checks will get dishonored, that is dishonor of checks. This is how our tele lesson will go in this video lesson, dear students. Now let us try to understand what is a paying banker. Paying banker is a banker who actually pays a check to his customer or to the order of his customer. For example, dear students, a customer draws a check on his banker. Now let us discuss how it is done. First, he writes the date. Then he indicates the name of the person, Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. whatever is the name on the check to whom it has to be paid. Then he writes the amount. After writing the date, after writing the name, he will write the amount, rupees 10,000 rupees. Then the amount in words is written, then the amount in figures is written, rupees 10,000, then 10,000 only in figures. Lastly, the account holder puts his signature on the check and he will see that the check is being paid. So then the bank customer hands over the check to the trade customer, that is, the check is valid for 3 months from the date of drawing. When the customer, that is the person who received, let us suppose I received the check, I will take the efforts to present it to the bank for collection or to the drawer's bank to receive payment. The payment process now gets started. So this is how the payment for a check goes on, which we normally do in the day-to-day transaction. So now let us discuss, dear student, what is a paying banker. So a paying banker, dear students, refers to the banker who holds the account of the drawer of the check and is obliged to make payment. Let us suppose I issued a check and the check is on Canara Bank and I issued the check to Mr. B and Mr. B has an account in State Bank of India. So State Bank of India will make the payment to Mr. B. So State Bank of India is the paying banker. So dear students, paying banker refers to the banker who holds the account of the drawer of the check and is obliged to make payment if the funds of the customers are sufficient to cover the amount of his check drawn. Let us suppose I have issued a check for rupees 10,000 and Mr. B goes to the paying banker and presents the check. If the balance in my account is 10,000 or more, then the paying banker will pay the amount. That is, when there is sufficient balance in my account, the paying banker will pay the money to the holder of that particular check to whom I have issued the check. So paying banker is a banker, dear students, who actually pays a check to his customer or to the order of his customer. I have issued a Canara Bank check, but the person to whom I have issued has an account in State Bank of India. So in this particular example, dear students, State Bank of India is the paying banker. That is, paying banker, dear students, is a banker who actually pays a check to his customer or the order of the customer. Now, dear students, after we have understood what a paying banker is, let us try to understand the duties and responsibilities of a paying banker. A banker has an obligation, dear students, to honor checks to his customers drawn on him and presented for payment, subject to the condition that there is a sufficient fund in the account and the check is in order. All the rules and conditions and the characteristics of the check is fulfilled. So, dear students, as per section 31 of the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, it states that the drawee of a check having sufficient funds to the drawee of a check having sufficient funds of the drawer in his hands properly applicable to the payment of such check must pay the check when duly required to do so, and in default of any such payment must compensate the drawer for any loss or damage caused for such default. In simple sense, my dear students, if you have sufficient balance and the check is issued properly, the bank has to honor the check, has to make the payment. That is a primary duty of a paying banker. So, dear students, it is bound duty of a bank to honor its customers' check after taking few precautions. So, let us see what are the precautions a paying banker has to make while making payment of the check whatever they have received. In other words, dear students, the paying banker is under an obligation. He has to honor the check subject to some conditions. So, what are the precautions to be taken? What are the conditions which a paying banker has to look before he makes a payment? First, my dear student, there must be sufficient funds in the customer's account on which the check is drawn. I have issued a check of rupees 10,000. So, I should have sufficient fund of 10,000 and more. Second, the fund should be properly applicable to the payment of such check. It should be paid for that particular check what is issued. Third, check should be properly drawn and should not be irregular or ambiguous. I cannot tell pay to Mr. X or Mr. Y or Mr. Z. It should be clear, pay to Mr. X rupees 10,000 rupees. I cannot write on the check pay to Mr. X or Mr. Y or Mr. Z. It should not be irregular, it should not be ambiguous. Another thing what I have to keep in mind, the precaution what I have to keep in mind is, my dear students, check should be presented during the banking hours of the bank. Let us suppose the banking hour of the bank is from 9 to 5, check should be presented within that particular time. Before or after is not valid. And also, dear students, check should be presented for payment within the validity period. Normally, the validity period of a check is 3 months from the date of issue. So, check should be presented within 3 months of their issue. So, these were the conditions, dear students. Now, let us try to understand the conditions to get statutory protection. The banker, the paying banker will get a statutory protection. So, let us discuss what are the conditions to get a statutory protection by the paying banker. What is that the paying banker has to do in order to get a statutory protection as per the Negotiable Instruments Act 1881. 1. It should be an open or a crossed check. That is, when a check is presented for payment, the banker should verify as to whether it is an open check or a crossed check. If there is a specific instruction, if the check is crossed, then it should be paid through an account. It cannot be paid across the counter. If the check is not crossed, you can pay it across the counter. But the moment the check is crossed, you have to pay to the account only, not across the counter. Second, it should be drawn on a specified branch. That is, check should be drawn on a particular branch at which they are presented. Next, mutilated checks. That is, if the banker finds that the check present to him is already mutilated, that is torn, the bank is having every right to return the check with a mark. On the check, they can cross, cancel and write mutilated check because it is torn or damaged. So, another condition what you have to keep in mind, that is the paying banker has to keep in mind to get statutory protection is, my dear student, the date of the check. you have to verify, the paying banker has to verify the date of the check. That is, date of a check is the most material matter in the check, as the legal validity of the check itself is decided by the date. The date on which I issue the check, it is valid for the next 3 months. So, as per the law, the check is valid for another 3 months. So, you have to verify, the paying banker has to verify the date of the check. If it is after the date of maturity, the check need not be paid. So, let us discuss what are the rules regarding the date. One, a check should bear a date in the column meant for it on the check. Wherever the column is specified, if you see on the right hand side corner on the top, at that particular place only the date has to be written. Date should not be incomplete. You cannot write only the date and the month and the year. You cannot leave it open. It should contain the day, the month and the year. 1st January 2025. It should be clearly mentioned, the date, the month and the year in the column prescribed. It should not be ambiguous in any manner. You can write pay Mr. A or Mr. B or Mr. Z. Specifically, whoever is the payer should be mentioned clearly. A post-dated check, let us suppose the check matures after 10 days. You cannot pay the check now, because a post-dated check cannot be paid by the banker although presented properly, because the customer may make stop payment. Let us suppose the date of the check is, let us suppose, 25th January 2025 and today's date is 20th January. You cannot make the payment on 20th, because between 20th and 25th January, within that 5 days, the person who has issued the check may give a stop payment instruction to the banker. So, a post-dated check should be verified. If you pay a post-dated check, there is no statutory protection to the paying banker. So, if a paying banker paid a post-dated check, dear students, he loses all the statutory protection as per the Negotiable Instruments Act. After we have learnt all these things, let us also learn few other conditions to get statutory protection. Another condition what the paying banker has to verify, my dear students, after the signature is the words and figures. If it differs, if you have written words rupees 10,000 and the figure is 1,000, in that particular case also the banker can return a check if the amount in words and the amount in figure differ. Word is 10,000, figure is 1,000. If it differs, even then the paying banker can stop the payment, he can reject. Amount in words and figure differ should be verified. Another thing what you as a paying banker has to verify, my dear students, is material alterations. That is, material alterations means changing the date, the amount, the name of the payee, removal of the crossing, etc. If there is any such material payment, a change in the date, a change in the name, a change in the crossing, if you have removed the crossing, you can reject, or you can tell them that you will not pay the money. So, check can be cancelled. Reserve Bank of India does not allow any alteration of any part of the check except the date. Another condition what the paying banker has to keep in mind is a specimen signature. Specimen signature is the signature of the customer got by the banker at the time when you open an account. You give a specimen signature, and that particular specimen signature is stored in the books as well as in the system. So, whenever a check comes for presentation for payment, the paying banker has to verify the specimen signature. If the signature on the check and the signature on the in the computer, whatever you have feeded the specimen signature both matches, only then the paying banker has to make the payment. Otherwise, the check can be returned. Dear students, the rules regarding specimen signature is a bank customer is supposed to adopt some style of signature as per his specimen signature. If there is any difference, you can just write specimen signature differs and you can cancel the check any moment of time. Another thing another condition which a paying banker has to verify before you make any payment, my dear students, is there a proper endorsement? Before paying the check, my dear students, the paying banker must should see whether there is any endorsement on it. If so, whether it is regular or not. If the endorsement is not proper, you can also reject the payment of the check. Another important condition which the paying banker has to verify before making any payment is, my dear students, the chronological order of payment. Normally, bank follows first in, first served. That is, while passing the check, it means payment of check will be made in the order of the receipt. First come, first served. The first received check should be paid first, then the second check should be paid second, so and so forth. That is, availability of account balance for passing a check will be assessed as per first in, first served basis. So, the chronological order of payment should be considered, should be verified before making any payment. Also, dear students, the paying banker should verify whether there is sufficient funds or not. If there is insufficient funds, the paying banker can reject the payment. Also, dear students, the paying banker should verify the rules to decide the availability of funds. That is, the minimum balance required. A current account has a minimum balance, a savings account has a minimum balance. Every bank has a minimum balance prescription. So, based on the minimum balance requirement of the bank, the minimum balance required bank has to maintain the minimum balance of the savings account or the current account. Based on that minimum balance, the rules to decide the availability of funds, the payment of the money has to be made by the paying banker. So, these are the conditions. Also, dear students, another condition called as garnishee order also should be kept in mind by the paying banker while paying the checks. That is, a garnishee order is a court order. Garnishee order is given by the court directing the third party, that is the garnishee. Here the garnishee is the banker, dear student, the paying banker. So, a garnishee order is a court order directing a third party, that is a garnishee, that is a paying banker, to pay money of a judgment debtor with him to a judgment creditor. That is, if you receive a garnishee order against a bank customer, dear student, the bank has to lock the customer, that is the bank has to lock the customer's account, that is the bank should not pay any amount if the bank receives a garnishee order for a particular account. The bank has to immediately lock that particular account and no payment has to be made. Here the garnishee is a banker. Also, dear students, the banker has to look into the inchovate checks. That is, if a check is incomplete, the paying banker has to verify the completeness of the check before making any payment. That is, if a check is incomplete with regards to date, it may be, if the date is not complete, if the amount is not complete, you write rupees 1000, you do not write in words, you do not write in figures. If the signature is not proper, if it is not complete, then you call it as an inchovate check or an incomplete check, and the paying banker need not pay any money to the incomplete check. So, after looking into the statutory requirements of a paying banker, let us try to understand the precautions to be taken by the paying banker before you make any payments, my dear students. The first one is a proper form of the check. Is it in the proper form as prescribed by the bank? Is the date on the check correct? Should be verified. Is the amount of the check should be verified? Is there any material alterations, whether the check is torn, mutilated, etc. should be verified. You should verify the drawer signature with the specimen signature what you have. You should also check the balance in the customer's account. if it is a current account, if it is a savings bank account, what is the minimum balance? If you pass on the check, is the minimum balance maintained, have to be verified, and the check should be presented during the working hours. 9 to 5 is the working hour of the bank. The check should be presented within that particular working hour of 9 to 5. So all these precautions should be taken, my dear students, by the paying banker before the paying banker makes any type of payment. Also, type of the check, if the check is crossed, the payment should be made only to the account. Regularity of the endorsement should be verified. The account should be seen, that is, a customer might have opened 2 or 3 accounts, to which account, from which account the payment has to be maintained. Like for example, I may be having 2 accounts in State Bank of India. So from which account the payment has to be made also should be verified before I make any payment. So these are the different types of precautions, my dear students, which a banker has to take before any payment is made. Also, dear students, after we have learned the precautions to be taken by the banker before any payment is made, let us try to understand what are the rules and regulations for material alteration. So, for any material alteration, that is any change in the date, any change in the name of the name on the check, any change in the signature, if the words is not right, if the amount is not right, if there is any sort of material alteration, what are the rules, what are the regulations, what are the guidelines as per the Negotiable Instrument Act? Let us discuss, dear students, for all the material alterations. What does the Negotiable Instrument Act tell us? For alteration of date, example, time of payment accelerated or postponed, or where date is in the instrument is inserted subsequent to the execution of instrument, no payment has to be made. If alteration of rate of interest is there in the instrument, if 10% rate of interest is changed to 15% or 9%, if any alteration the rate of interest on any of the bill of exchange or a negotiable instrument, it has to be, payment has to be stopped. Alteration of the sum payable, if 1000 rupees, another 0 is added and you make it 10,000 rupees, alteration of any sum payable, payment has to be stopped. Alteration in the time of payment, that is a bill of exchange has a validity of 3 months. So if it is altered, if it is instead of 3 months, it is altered to 1 month or 4 months, you cannot make the payment for the bill of exchange. So alteration of the place of payment, that is change of bank at which the bill is payable. Likewise, alteration by addition of a place of payment, any change of place or addition of place, such alterations also have to be kept in mind and it should not be accepted. Alteration by addition of parties, earlier it was in the bill of exchange, it was Mr. A, pay to Mr. A. Later on you add pay to Mr. A and pay to Mr. B. Any addition or subtraction in the parties of the bill, payment has to be stopped by the paying banker. Alteration by erasure of an account payee crossing, like you have issued a bill of exchange or a negotiable instrument or a check in simple terms and you have crossed the check. Later on you have erased the crossing on the check. Such alterations have to be verified, checked, and payment has to be stopped or verified by the paying banker before you make any sort of payment for such type of alterations. So after we have learned all the material alteration, dear students, let us try to learn what is payment in due course. Payment in due course means payment made in good faith and without negligence to the person in possession of the instrument under circumstances which do not afford a reasonable ground for believing that he is not entitled to receive payment of the amount therein mentioned. Very simple, dear students. Payment in due course means, one, payment is made in good faith. Let us suppose you get a check, the banker gets a check for payment. So the paying banker assumes that the payment is made in good faith and without any negligence. All the precautions, whatever the paying banker has to take, whatever we have read, you have to verify the date, you have to verify the name, you have to verify the signature, etc., etc. Everything, there is no negligence on the part of the banker. So, without negligence to the person in possession of the instrument under circumstances which do not afford a reasonable ground for believing that he is not entitled to receive. That is, the paying banker has no doubt on the holder that he should not receive or payment should not be made to this particular person. So, this is what is called as payment in due course. So, payment in due course must fulfill the following conditions as per the definition of the Negotiable Instruments Act, dear student. 1. The payment must be made in good faith and without negligence. Second, it should be made to the rightful holder of the instrument or to a person who appears to be the rightful holder. There should be no suspicious circumstances. You as a paying banker has verified everything. There is no suspicious circumstances that would make a reasonable person doubt whether the person receiving the payment is legally entitled to. Also, after we have learned who is a payment in due course, dear students, let us learn when banker may refuse payment. When the check is post dated, when the banker has no sufficient funds, when he is doubtful about the legality of the check, that is, the paying banker is doubtful about the legality of the check, when the check is not duly presented, that it is presented after the banking hours, when the check on the face of it is incomplete, when the check is presented at the branch where the customer has no account. I do not have an account in that branch and I present it there, you can refuse the payment. When the account is jointly maintained and one person does not sign, and when the check has been allowed to become stale, that is after 3 months. So, in such situation, dear student, the banker may refuse payment. Now, let us learn when the banker must, it is not may, must refuse, 100% must refuse payment. When customer countermands payment, that is when a stop payment instruction is given by the customer, when the banker receives notice of customer's death, when the customer has an adjudged as insolvent, if the customer is being declared as insolvent, if the customer dies, when the customer gives a stop payment notice, when the banker receives notice of customer becoming insane, in customer's insanity, when an order of the court prohibits payment, when the customer gives notice of assignment of the credit balance of his account, and when the holder's title is defective and the banker comes to know that the holder's title is not right or defective, when the customer has given notice for closing his account. After the customer has given notice for closing his account, you cannot make any payment. So, in such situation, dear student, the banker must refuse the payment. That is when stop payment is given, when the banker receives notice of death, when the customer becomes insolvent, when the customer becomes insane, when the court prohibits payment, when the customer when the banker feels the holder's title is defective and the customer gives a notice for closing his accounts. In such situations, dear students, the banker must refuse payments. Finally, dear students, let us understand when the check is dishonored. When does a paying banker dishonor checks? 1. When there is insufficiency of funds. When the funds are insufficient, the paying banker refuses payment. 2. When notice of customer's death is received, in such situations also, the bankers can dishonor the check. When you receive notice of customer's insolvency, a banker should refuse payment of check soon after the customer is adjudicated as insolvent, declared as insolvent. Another reason why a check can be dishonored is receipt of the garnishee order. That is, where garnishee order is received attaching the whole amount, the banker should stop payment on checks received after the receipt of such an order. In such case, the banker is the garnishee, but if the order is for a specified amount, leaving the specified amount, check should be honored for the remaining amount where the sufficient balance is made. Also, dear students, the check can be dishonored when presentation of a post-dated check. That is, the banker may refuse a check when the check is presented before the valid date. Stale checks, that is when the check is presented after a period of 3 months from the date it bears, the banker may refuse to make payment. After the 3 months of validity, after that particular date when the check is presented, the paying banker can refuse. If there is any material alteration, that is if the check is torn, if it is mutilated, you can dishonor the check. When the drawer's signature, if the signature of the drawer on the check does not tally with the specimen signature, the banker may refuse payments. To conclude, my dear students, paying banker is a bank responsible for making payments on checks and other negotiable instruments drawn by its customer. When a check is presented, the paying banker verifies essential details such as the account holder signature, available balances and any stop payment instructions before processing the payment. The banker, dear students, must act in due diligence to prevent fraud and unauthorized payments. So, as per the Negotiable Instrument Act 1881, dear students, the paying banker is legally bound to honor valid checks, but is also protected from liability if payments are made in good faith and according to banking regulations. Thank you for your patient listening.